We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! This is part 9 of What If Naruto Became a Demon King. During the second stage of the Chunin Exams, Orochimaru made a terrible mistake in blocking the seal that held the Kyuubi. He gave birth to a being with more power than Raizen himself. Watch as Uzumaki Naruto takes the world by storm as the new Demon King. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 18, The Human and Inhuman Mind.
When Naruto got home, he was somewhat surprised to see Kyuubi already there. He moved over to where she was sitting on the couch, 2 steaming cups of tea on the coffee table in front of her. "Kyuubi-hime," he greeted as he sat down next to her. The moment he had done so, Kyuubi cuddled herself into his side and kissed him soundly on the lips in greeting. Naruto wrapped an arm around her in response and kissed back. As her tongue lightly caressed his own, he absently noted that she had a minty taste to her, which he assumed was from the tea she was drinking. After they parted, he looked at her for a moment, then around the room before asking, "I'm guessing you left Kin and Taiyuya at the hot springs?"
Yes, Kyuubi admitted freely, as Naruto knew she would. While the woman could be more duplicitous than anyone he had ever met, when not plotting and planning she was as blunt and honest as a hammer. "Here, I made some tea for you, Naruto-san," she said, grabbing the tea she had made for him and holding it out. Naruto smiled as he took the cup from her and took a sip of it. When he brought it away from his lips, he said, "This is the tea you had stocked in our mansion in Makai, isn't it?" "Yes," Kyuubi answered, smiling when he said our Habana tea made from a special plant found only in my garden. Naruto nodded, as a fox demon. Kyuubi was rather in tune with nature. While many in the elemental countries knew her for her fox fire and hurricane creating tail swipes, which were a result of directly manipulating her Yuki as was her specialty as a demon lord, Kyuubi's true talent had always lay in her illusions and plant-based attacks. Once they had finished their tea, Naruto created a Kage Bunshin to take the cups away while he and Kyuubi snuggled. Their time was interrupted, however, when a knock came at the door. Kyuubi gave a complaining whine when Naruto stood up and went over to the door. Opening it, he wasn't all that surprised to see his father standing there, as the man would visit him often. "What's up, To-san?" asked Naruto after noting the serious look on his father's face. "Naruto, can I come in?" "Sure, make yourself at home." Naruto opened the door further and let Minato inside. Closing the door, Naruto created another Kage Bunshin to make some more tea and went back over to sit down with Kyuubi. Rather than let her snuggle with him, Naruto grabbed her calves and placed her feet on his lap. Just as Kyuubi opened her mouth to ask him what he was doing, the blonde began to massage her feet. Oh, Kyuubi purred as she fell back against the couch, her toes curling and flexing due to the pleasurable sensations Naruto's message was giving to her. Chuckling, the blonde Uzumaki added some chakra to his fingertips, spinning it in various directions to increase the bliss Kyuubi was feeling from his touch. Minato frowned slightly at the display, but didn't comment on it as he said, "I just got finished with a meeting of the council. I'm sure this won't be surprising to you, but you were the main topic of conversation." "You're right, I'm not surprised," Naruto said with a snort. "Even when I was younger they would find some way to bother me. I remember the first time I ever did a prank. I had placed several water balloons filled with paint in the rafters of a shop where I was kicked out of. I had attached them to a trip wire so that when someone tripped the wire they would fall and hit the one that tripped them in the face. As it had been my first prank, I was dumb enough to stick around and ended up getting caught." He shook his head. "I remember one of the council members actually wanted me executed, claiming the Kyuubi was beginning to act through me. Of course the man hadn't actually mentioned Kyuubi, as doing so would have gotten him killed, but the way he had said it to describe the demon lord had told Naruto all he needed to know." Minato frowned at the story, shaking his head, and dispelled whatever thoughts he had on the subject before he continued. "Well, they didn't want you killed or anything this time. Not that they would now that Naruto was not only a national hero but the son of the Yondaime. Even the council wasn't dumb enough to call for his execution now. They were trying to convince me to let you rebuild the Uzumaki clan in Konoha." "Let me guess," Naruto said dryly. "They want my Rinnegan?" Minato nodded. "Yes, they tried to make me place you under the CRA." Naruto blinked. "CRA? What's that?" It's a clan law that was passed for when a clan lost all of its members but one, Minato explained. Basically, you have to take multiple wives and get them pregnant before your 18th birthday. If we were to rebuild the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, you would be subject to this law. Yeah, no thanks, Naruto said with a snort. I'm not gonna fuck a bunch of women just because those foggies on the council want me to. If I were to consider taking on multiple mates, it will be on my terms. He smiled when Kyuubi gave an appreciative groan as he switched feet. I figured as much. I believe putting you under the CRA was just the council's way of trying to leave you powerless by placing you under several arranged marriages and using loopholes in the law to take the power of your clan for themselves. Minato trailed off as he looked at Kyuubi and a thought seemed to occur to him. Speaking of power, Kyuubi, I have a question. When the redhead opened a single eye to look at the older blonde Namix, he continued saying, I've noticed that you still seem to have all of your chakra, when I had split it in half and permanently sealed it away. Why is that? Kyuubi gave a derisive snort. You don't honestly think you could permanently seal away my power, do you? She asked derisively. Minato blinked in confusion and with a too sweet to truly be innocent smile, Kyuubi said, like all creatures, be they human or demon, my power is made up of an equal portion of physical and spiritual energy. You can't just permanently seal it away. All you did was temporarily take away half of my Yuki. It just took a few extra years to regain my power than it normally would have. So you're saying my using the Shiki Fuin was not only unnecessary but didn't actually do anything in the long run? Asked Minato. The look on his face was priceless. The man looked like he just swallowed a large bug that had been rolling around on horse shit for several hours. Yep. As Minato felt an embarrassed blush spread out over his face, Naruto began laughing rather raucously at hearing his father's unnecessary sacrifice. It might seem a little cruel to poke fun at him, as the man knew next to nothing of demons, but Naruto just couldn't help but find the situation humorous. Minato had quite literally sacrificed his soul to the Shinigami, or Koenma as the man in charge of the dead was now known, for no reason. A few seconds later Tayuya and Kin walked in to hear Naruto still laughing, both wondering what the hell was so funny. Ooh Kami! Naruto asamaname! Kyuubi gave one last shout before slumping down on the bed, feeling more spent than she could if she ran up a vertical wall at full speed for 3 months without stopping. Thankfully it was the good kind of tired, where her body was exhausted from making love to her mate. Said mate pulled himself out of her and leaned onto his side, using one of his elbows to prop himself up as he let a hand trace patterns on Kyuubi's stomach, leaving goosebumps whenever his fingers left her skin. He just looked at her for several seconds, and she couldn't help but wonder about what he was thinking of. Deep thoughts, Naruto-sama? She asked after several long moments. I was thinking about what the council was trying to do, Naruto said. Force me into multiple arranged marriages in order to access several loopholes to take my power away. It was a rather ingenious plan, Kyuubi agreed. Cunning and conniving. It wouldn't have worked since even if you agreed to their terms and they actually tried using those loopholes you could just kill them. I would probably do that, yes, Naruto agreed with a nod. He had no compunctions about killing people who overstepped their bounds with him. While there were certain things he may be lenient towards, people trying to take away his power, which he had earned through blood and sweat, was not one of them. Still, this CRA Minato spoke of has some merit. Ha! Naruto blinked as he looked at her in confusion. Kyuubi just smiled as she said, while the CRA is not used by demons, even tribes and clans like I come from, it is not unusual for a powerful demon to take on multiple lovers. By having multiple women bearing powerful demon children, they will have a ready-made army that only needs time to grow and be trained. Other demons see the number of lovers someone has as a sign of status. Even Raizen-sama was like that. He may have only loved one woman but he had multiple lovers before his death. Were you one of them? Asked Naruto. No, Kyuubi said with a shake of her head. I am an upper S-class demon and I was treated as an equal by him, so he didn't mate with me. If a demon were to have a harem, it would have created a hierarchy among the females he is mated to. Demon society calls these sister wives. Raizen already had several powerful upper S-class demons as his lovers, adding another, and the one he named his second in command at that, would have disrupted the hierarchy. She paused, and in a quiet voice said, though before I became the Kyuubi I had been the 15th wife of one of the Kitsune clan's more powerful males. Did he mate with you? Asked Naruto. Despite what she was telling him having happened in the past, he was feeling angered and possessive of her at the thought of someone else claiming her as a mate. It was likely caused by his demon blood, but the thought of anyone touching Kyuubi in an intimate manner other than him caused violent thoughts to surge in his mind. "No," Kyuubi said, shaking her head. "I wasn't that powerful back then, only being a three-tails. He didn't believe I was worthy of mating with him." Naruto frowned at the bitter tone in her voice when she said the word mate, but decided to help her by making her feel better. He pulled Kyuubi closer and rolled her over onto her side so that she was facing him. She looked at him curiously, but he just leaned in and claimed her lips with his own. Her hands instinctively went around him, pulling their nude bodies flush against each other. Their legs became entwined with each other and Kyuubi felt Naruto's cock rub against her nether lips, causing her to moan in pleasure. When they pulled back, Naruto looked at her softly and said, "Then that man was a fool to not see the amazing woman you are." He caressed her cheek with the back of his fingers, getting Kyuubi to close her eyes and a light purring sound to arise from the back of her throat. "And his loss is my gain. I promise I will never treat you as anything less than my equal." "Thank you," Kyuubi mumbled through teary eyes. She grabbed the hand caressing her face and pressed her lips against it. Naruto moved his hand to the back of her head, leaned in and pressed his mouth against hers. While the kiss became impassioned, it stayed tender, the movements of their tongues more along the lines of a dance than their usual battle of dominance. With some help from Kyuubi's guiding hand, Naruto slid back into her and began to gently rock his hips. They made love slowly this time, neither feeling the desire for the fast-paced and sometimes a near-violent sex they usually had. While it might not have been as heavy as their usual love-making, it was no less meaningful. The pair's mutual finish came half an hour later, with both of them moaning into each other's mouths. Naruto rolled onto his back, sliding out of Kyuubi's warmth with a wet pop. Kyuubi pressed herself into his side as an arm went around her. As they lay there, basking in the afterglow of their love-making, Naruto asked, "What did you mean when you said the CRA had merit?" Kyuubi didn't bother opening her eyes as she snuggled into her mate's warm embrace and said, "I wasn't talking about the CRA but the act of taking multiple lovers. As I said, demon society is more prone to such a thing and there are various advantages to having more than one woman bear you kits. Not only is it a symbol of status and power, but it will also give you many children to help make your army even more powerful after some point in time. It would also give me a lot of children to spoil," Naruto admitted somewhat reluctantly. "I've always wanted a large family." Kyuubi nodded at his words, knowing that his reasons for wanting a large family were because he had never had a family before. When people were lacking something that others had and took for granted, it was a natural reaction to want that which they didn't have that much more. Which is just another reason to take on multiple lovers, Kyuubi began to explain. The Kitsune clan has always been small. This is due to the fact that birth rates among Kitsune are low. A female Kitsune will only be able to birth one, or if she's lucky maybe two kits before she becomes sterile. And even then, there's only a 1 in 10 chance of that Kitsune being male. It's nature's way of keeping our clan from overpopulating Makai. A hand began to run through her hair and Kyuubi sighed in content as she heard Naruto speak. "But is it right for me to take multiple women like that? I don't want to mate with several women just so they can bear my children. If those were the only reasons you wanted to take multiple lovers, I would be disappointed in you, Naruto-sama," Kyuubi said with a smile. "That you don't want to claim more mates just so they can bear you children or be your sex slaves is the reason I'm suggesting this. Otherwise I wouldn't have said anything." She grinned when she heard Naruto's mumble of "cunning little vixen" and said, "Why thank you. What if the women I take as my mates are human?" asked Naruto. "I doubt demon society would look upon that with respect. Most demons who actually manage to catch a human female will usually make her a slave," Kyuubi said in admittance to his question. "To mate with a human is not looked upon highly. However, we can work around that." Naruto asked for a further explanation, so Kyuubi began to explain, saying, "Because of me. Unlike most demons, most of my Yuki was actually created from chakra. It simply changed into Yuki because I was a demon. I assume that if a human had been hit with that chakra it would have remained chakra. However, because of how my Yuki was made, it is not toxic to humans. It may feel oppressive, but it wouldn't kill them. Now because of this, I would be able to channel my Yuki into any woman you claim as a mate. It won't turn them into a demon or anything, but it will give them a form of immunity to your Yuki, and you can mark them. With your mark they will have a power boost due to the fact that they can use chakra, and any children they have will be 2/3 RDS demon like you." Naruto nodded. That had been something he hadn't actually thought about. His Yuki was highly corrosive and poisonous to humans. Even most demons would be unable to stand near him if he began putting out his full power. Only those of a higher S-class would be able to truly withstand the power of his Yuki, and that was simply because they could match his power with their own to form an immunity. What about aging? Asked Naruto as another point he thought about came up. I don't want to marry someone just to watch them age and die in front of me a few decades later. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that, Kyuubi admitted. The simple fact is no one has ever been in the position you're in. Right now, everything I'm saying is simply theory due to the fact that it's never been done before. It's possible that having your Yuki flowing through them will keep them young, but then again it's not. This will unfortunately be a matter of trial and error. I see, Naruto said with a sigh. He smiled a second later when he began squeezing Kyuubi's ass, getting a moan out of the red-haired beauty. I don't really want to talk about this anymore. Well then, why don't we find something more pleasurable to talk about, Kyuubi said with a smile. She climbed onto Naruto and let him slide back into her. I don't really feel like talking at all to be honest, Naruto replied as Kyuubi began bouncing up and down on his shaft. Pushing himself up, he took one of her nipples in his mouth and flicked it with his tongue. He grinned when she gasped and looked up at her to say, "But I do know of some pleasurable activities we can do." With that he took her nipple fully in his mouth. For the rest of the night he delighted and pleased his mate until the both fell asleep from exhaustion. Samui looked around as she waited for Naruto to meet her for the tour he promised her. She had been gathering what information she could on him as discreetly as possible. Thankfully it wasn't hard. With Naruto's new fame as the son of the Yondaime Hokage and his defeat of Orochimaru, it was difficult not to hear his name in a conversation. However, there was a problem stemming from the fact that no one knew anything about him other than basics. They didn't know what he was skilled in, how strong he was, or anything substantial. Most of what she heard just seemed to be hero worship with the occasional jealous idiot. And she didn't want to ask about him and seem suspicious, which left her only option being to get to know Naruto better. A few minutes after she got to the stand, Naruto appeared as well. "Hey," he greeted, and seemed to notice her new clothes as his eyes looked her form over for a moment. She had chosen to wear a light yellow sundress for the occasion and a pair of basic sandals. She was surprised when she saw that his look, while appreciative, he did not seem to be stripping her with his eyes. "You look nice outside of work clothes," he complimented. "Thank you," Samui said with a nod, not blushing or even giving any indication that what he said had flustered or was in any way significant to her, unlike the last time they had spoken. He had told her to be herself, meaning he obviously knew her shy and bubbly act at the ramen stand was just that, an act. It would be best, she had determined, if she acted like she always did to get close to him, as he might become suspicious of her if she continued to act like she had. She took a moment herself to look over her fellow blonde. While she would not say anything out loud, as doing so would not be cool, she had to admit he cut an attractive figure. He too was wearing civvies, or civilian clothing, a pair of faded black jeans and a dark orange shirt with a black spiral on the back and a smaller one on the chest. Though if she were honest, Samui would admit the thing she liked the most were his eyes. He had his Rinnegan out, which he had out last time they met, and it made her wonder if they could even be turned off. They were pretty cool, she had to admit. "Have you had breakfast yet?" he asked, getting her to shake her head. Naruto grinned and placed her arm within his own. "Then that's what we'll do first." "What type of food do you like?" "I'm cool with anything," Samui admitted with a shrug. She didn't really have a favorite food. Truth be told, she didn't have a favorite anything. Aside from her duties as a kunoichi, she had almost no social life. Her meals usually consisted of simple food like bento boxes. "Then why don't we just go to a place that offers a wide variety of food?" Naruto suggested as he began to lead her around the village. It was a pretty interesting experience for Samui as her fellow blonde showed her around. Not walking around the village itself, Konoha really wasn't all that different from Kyuumo, sans the minor differences in architecture and the fact that Kyuumo didn't have any trees. However, nearly every place Naruto showed her had some kind of story behind it. Usually these stories coincided with one of the many pranks Naruto would pull on the village, whether it was a grocery store, a restaurant, or even a shinobi supply shop. Samui knew from some of her investigating of him that Naruto had been a prankster during his younger years. Samui ended up getting taken to an Akamichi-owned restaurant in the market district. She figured the reason was because they were having a breakfast buffet there, with a cornucopia of different foods, some of which Samui was sure did not come from anywhere in the elemental nations, as she had never seen it before. Though she would be the first to admit she had never bothered to try a wide variety of food. Leaving Naruto to pay for the meal as he had offered to, Samui took her plate, which was filled with some kind bread-looking food. It looked like some kind of dough-based breakfast. The bread, for lack of a better word, was round and thick, about the size of her plate, and looked like a giant honeycomb due to the many square imprints in the food. She would have thought it was a pancake, but considering she had never seen a pancake look like this before, was forced to concede that she had no clue what it was. A few seconds later Naruto sat down. She eyed the large stack of food on his plate, ranging from the bread she had gotten, to French toast, pancakes, hash browns, eggs, and who knew what else. A bit much, don't you think? She asked with a raised eyebrow in her cool demeanor. Naruto shook his head. For most people, maybe. But I have a large metabolism. I require at least 6 times more food than anyone else, barring maybe an akimichi, and I can still out-eat them in some foods. Samui just looked at him for a second longer as he began to eat. And by eat, she meant he literally inhaled the food so fast his hands were a complete blur even to her. 1 second his plate was piled high, the next he was finished and was picking his teeth with a toothpick he had gotten from somewhere. She was actually somewhat surprised that he could eat as fast as he had, yet still remain perfectly polite and well-mannered. There was not a mess to be seen on his face or the table, and hadn't stuffed his face to the brim until she was able to see the food in his mouth. He had just eaten it super fast. It was a paradox she vowed to figure out before her mission ended. She ate much more slowly, using the utensils they provided. While most places only had chopsticks, a few of the newer restaurants and obviously any Akimichi-owned eatery also had the option of forks, knives, and spoons. A fact she was rather grateful for, as eating this particular type of food with a chopstick would have been difficult. Cutting a piece of the dough-made substance and sticking it with her fork, Samui brought it to her mouth. She closed her mouth around the fork and began to chew the food, a thoughtful look crossing her face as she did so. These taste a lot like pancakes, Samui mumbled, more to herself than to her current companion. They're called waffles, Naruto said, having already finished his food in what Samui calculated to be less than 2.5 seconds, he was now contently sipping tea. She quirked an eyebrow at him, asking for silent clarification. He seemed to notice because a second later he looked at her and shrugged, saying, "Really, they are pancakes. Same batter and make, just cooked differently. They're cooked in an iron waffle, which gives them those indentations you see." "Ah," Samui said, continuing to eat. "You seem to know a lot about cooking." "Well, I did live on my own for 13 years, Naruto said with the kind of nonchalance that someone would use for talking about the waiter. "That's not cool." She trailed off when Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. Realizing he may be thinking she had said he wasn't cool for living on his own, or something along those lines, she corrected herself. "That you lived on your own, I mean. It's not cool that you had to live on your own." Naruto chuckled to let her know he wasn't offended. "I got used to it, and I'm glad I didn't have to rely on others. It made me self-sufficient." That was a bit of an understatement. Living on your own for 13 years forced you to think smart, learning to manage your money, how to repair the leaks and problems that arose in your apartment. It wasn't the kind of smart Sakura had, with her encyclopedic brain, or Shikamaru's over 200 IQ. Naruto had street smarts, the ability to adapt and think on his feet, which had helped him survive. "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I suppose," Samui said with Naruto nodding in acknowledgement of her comment. Breakfast ended soon after that, and Naruto ended up taking her around the rest of Konoha. He showed her various shops and restaurants, took her to the clan district where Konoha's shinobi clans lived. While there he told Samui about a particularly funny story of when he had snuck into the Hyuga compound and dyed everyone's clothing bright pink and strung their undergarments about the market district. The way Naruto told it, using grand gestures and comments that lightly insulted the Hyuga clan, actually got Samui to giggle. However, she had quickly realized what she had done and closed her mouth, an actual embarrassed blush forming on her face. Back in Kyuubi, Samui was always known for being cold to the point that most people thought she was made of ice. Even her normal 2 teammates told her she was frigid. Which was why her actually making a sound as girly and happy as a giggle, without it being an act to get closer to Naruto, surprised and embarrassed her. She simply didn't giggle. Period. Naruto seemed to notice her plight and took some pity on her by not teasing her as he normally would have when someone was embarrassed. He did bring her out of her slight daze, however, by linking an arm through one of hers. She looked at him questioningly, but he just smiled and began leading her away from the clan district. "I figured we'd go to one of Konoha's parks," he said after a few moments. Thanks to the Shodai's ability in Mokuton, wood release, we've always had the most beautiful parks. So these trees were created by the village's first leader? Asked Samui as they entered one of the parks. She had to admit it was a very beautiful place. They were walking along a stone pathway surrounded by trees. Many of the trees were of the kind she had seen all around Konoha, but there were a few that were of a different species. She saw several sakura trees, pine trees, oaks, and many others that she did not recognize on sight. They eventually got tired of just walking aimlessly and sat themselves down on one of the benches that's sitting on the side of the pavement. As they did, Samui winced a little as she felt a creak in her upper back. She brought up a hand in an attempt to alleviate some of the stress in her back, an action which did not go unnoticed by Naruto. You feeling alright? He asked. Samui nodded. My back is just a little sore. She had always had back troubles, ever since she was 13. One of her teammates had often joked it was because she had such large breasts, and though Samui was sure he said it as a way to anger their female teammate, his reasoning was actually right. Having a bust to rival Tsunade's at the age of 13, where her body was much slimmer than even the legendary healer's was, came with those kinds of problems. Naruto nodded before saying, turn around, please. Samui looked at him oddly for a second but did as asked. When her back was to him, she was about to ask what he was going to do when she felt a pair of hands begin to knead her back. Oh. Samui groaned as Naruto messaged her neck and shoulders. He seemed to know what he was doing, and as Samui began to lean into his touch, she couldn't believe how good it felt, or that she was even allowing him to touch her mission notwithstanding. Still, she couldn't deny how good it felt. If the men who offered to give me a message in Kyuubi weren't such perverts, I would probably have accepted their offers if this is what it feels like, she thought to herself. That had actually been one of the largest reasons she was so cold to others. The amount of men that wanted to get in her pants was astronomically large. Even many of her fellow jonin couldn't hold a conversation with her without staring at her chest. Even the Raikage had that problem, and considering he had never really seemed interested in women, that was saying something. There was something different about Naruto though. Even during their first meeting he hadn't looked at her breasts once. Or at least, not any longer than he had every other part of her. When the Rinnegan user had first seen her working at the Ichiraka ramen bar, the way he looked at her was simply that of someone sizing another person up and formulating a base opinion of them on their observations, something that all ninja did instinctively. There had been nothing sexual in his gaze. She hadn't even been able to figure out if he thought she was attractive. It was that which had surprised her the most. That he didn't seem to look at her as another piece of meat. The reason might have been Kit, the mysterious girlfriend of Naruto's. No one knew much about her. She was apparently as new to Konoha as Samui was. The woman had just come onto the scene without any past and snagged the man who was now considered one of Konoha's most eligible bachelors in an instant. She was also a hindrance to Samui's mission, and may need to be taken care of at some point. But Samui would have to find out more about her before she did anything. Sighing, her thoughts left her when Naruto's talented hands kneaded a particularly pleasurable part on her shoulder. She let out a louder groan as some of the knots in that area disappeared. Why, you're very skilled with your hands, Samui commented to Naruto, a slight hitch in her breath as he hit another one of those points that were filled with knots, where he let his chakra get rid of them. Thank you, Naruto said in a distracted tone. He sounded like he was actually concentrating rather hard on what he was doing. You have a lot of knots in your back, Samui-san. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised you can function with so many of them. Samui couldn't say anything on his comment, her voice having left due to the ministrations of her fellow blonde's talented hands. The message was interrupted, however, as a small pulse of chakra caught their attention. Turning in time to see an ANBU member appear before them within a swirl of leaves, Naruto took his hands off of Samui's back, much to her disappointment. I take it Toussaint wants something, said Naruto. Hi, Hokage-sama has requested your presence, Uzumaki-san. Naruto nodded and turned to look at Samui. I'm sorry to cut this short, but it looks like my old man is calling me, he said. Samui nodded and felt oddly disappointed that their time had ended so soon. Or maybe she was just upset that her back message had been cut short. Whatever the case, there wasn't much she could do. It's cool, she said, being a shinobi and all, you don't have scheduled shifts like I do. True, Naruto said, standing. He probably wants me for a mission, so I'll see you when I get back. Maybe we can hang out and I'll introduce you to my friends. I would like that, Samui said with a nod. She watched as Naruto and the ANBU disappeared in a swirl of leaves, before standing up and beginning to make her way back home. She had to get ready for a shift at Ichiraku's in a few hours. Naruto appeared within the Hokage's office to see Jiraiya, Hayashi and Sarutobi already there. He looked at Minato as he walked further into the room. "I take it something has come up," he said, deciding to get straight to the point. His father wouldn't have called all 3 members on the advisory council unless there was something important that he felt needed more insights than just his own. "Yes," Minato said, and Naruto noticed he was in his Hokage mode. His face was serious, a blank mask that let out nothing. "I'm sure you know of the trouble we are having with trying to discreetly settle the dispute IWA created when they tried to assassinate you?" After receiving a nod from Naruto, he continued. "We have been sending correspondences to them for a while now but have yet to receive anything more than false platitudes. Actions needs to be taken, but we don't want to go to war." Naruto understood that war was the last thing Minato wanted. The last time the shinobi of their villages waged war, many died on both sides. It had been a disastrous affair of death and bloodshed that had embroiled 4 of the Big Five, with Kiri only having avoided it due to them being so isolated and already embroiled in their own civil war. If another war broke out between IWA and Konoha, Suna would soon join, and if Kyuubi didn't join in soon after, then they would likely stay out of until the war was over and then pick up the leftovers from whoever won, as that country would be too weak to do anything. While Naruto was sure they could both win any war that came their way, especially with him and Minato at the front, along with beating Kyuubi afterwards, he knew it would cost more lives than a failed assassination attempt was worth. "You wouldn't have told me all of this unless you had a plan," Naruto commented. If there was one thing he had learned about his father during the short time they had known each other, it was that Minato never did anything without having a plan. "That is correct," Minato smiled at his son, though it was a grim smile. "I sent a final letter to Inoki a few days ago, stating that he will meet with me in Tetsu no Kuni, Iron Country, where we will discuss the matter of reparations. If he does not come, then it will be taken as a declaration of war." Naruto's eyes widened a bit as he realized how serious this was beginning to get. He knew that war was a likely possibility, and if Konoha learned of the assassination attempt, they would be rioting in the streets and clamoring to go to war. He also knew the few shinobi who knew about the event didn't want to experience another war. "Did he accept?" asked Naruto. "Yes, I will meet Inoki in Tetsu no Kuni in 3 weeks, Minato said. "I have already sent a letter to the samurai of that country and they have agreed to let us use their land as a meeting ground. We will be guarded by their samurai." Tetsu no Kuni was a politically unusual country in that it had remained neutral and never been involved in the ninja wars. In fact, the shinobi created a rule since long ago that they would not meddle with the land. Because of that, it had been able to remain neutral throughout the trying times other countries have had. This was mainly because of the country's samurai force, which was very powerful. Tetsu no Kuni's samurai were trained in using chakra, though their use of it was different than a ninja's. By channeling chakra through their blade, they could create truly monstrous attacks, ranging from simply sharpening their blade to unleashing a giant wave of chakra that would destroy everything in its path. Many of their elite samurai were said to be on par with a jonin of one of the 5 major hidden villages. "I take it I am to go with you?" said Naruto, having guessed the reason he had been called. Minato nodded. "It was agreed upon that we would each be allowed 2 bodyguards. I have chosen you and Jiraiya-sensei to be mine. This is as much a show of strength as anything else. Sarutobi-san has agreed to look after things while I'm gone." Naruto nodded at the man's words in understanding. Both he and Jiraiya were considered S-rank ninja, and though only Minato knew it, Naruto was considered an upper A-class demon, which meant he had power levels that could beat out 10 S-ranks in raw power. By having 3 people of their level, it sent a message to IWA about just how damaging a war with Konoha would be. "When do we leave?" asked Naruto. "Tomorrow." Naruto nodded. "In that case, I think I'm going to take Kid out to dinner. Somewhere nice." "I'll see you tomorrow too, San, Aja-san, Hayashi-san, Ero-senin. How come I'm the only one who gets a disrespectful nickname?" asked a disgruntled Jiraiya. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "I call Sarutobi old man. Is that not disrespectful enough? Besides, out of everyone here, you're the only one who deserves such a title. Especially when I caught you trying to peek on mine and Kit's private time." Jiraiya had the decency to look sheepish. It had been 2 weeks after Naruto had come back after returning Tsunade to the village. He had taken Kyuubi out to dinner and Jiraiya had at some point spotted them. Apparently not getting the inspiration he hoped for by peeking in the hot springs, he had followed Naruto and Kyuubi to their house where they had started getting into the hot and heavy. However, his giggle had alerted the two as they were in the process of stripping each other's clothes off. That night the pair had given Jiraiya a beating that put the one Tsunade had when she nearly killed him to shame. The man had been sent to the hospital with 4 broken ribs, a punctured left lung, both legs broken, his right arm broken and bent at an awkward angle, the fingers of each hand broken, a shattered nose, a skull fracture and major concussion, and finally, Kyuubi had ripped off the man's left nut. All in all, they were some rather serious and life-threatening injuries he had suffered. Naruto was actually surprised the man managed to somehow bounce back fully healed within 3 weeks. He had wondered if Jiraiya had some kind of demonic healing of his own, but soon realized the pervert was just so used to being beaten that the wounds no longer affected him very much. "How long are you going to hold that against me?" complained Jiraiya. "As long as you remain a pervert, I suppose," Naruto said with a grin as he disappeared via Shundo. That evening Naruto did take Kyuubi out to dinner, at a restaurant called the Golden Leaf Pagoda, the most expensive restaurant within Konoha. While Naruto had never boasted about money, being as frugal as he was with it due to his life before the invasion. However, the blonde had become rather rich since his first A-rank mission in which he and the other members of the now-defunct Team 7 had fought against Haku and Momoichi Zabuza in Nami no Kuni, Wave Country. The amount of revenue he had only increased after gaining the bounty for Orochimaru, which was the second highest bounty for a missing ninja from Konoha, only being beaten by Uchiha Itachi. Combine that with the A-rank mission to bring back Tsunade, and another A-rank he went on to protect a high-paying noble during a business transaction a few weeks ago, and it was easy for him to say he was rather well off. Dinner conversation was rather light. He and Kyuubi did not talk about anything serious, mainly preferring to tease each other with inane comments slightly laden in sexual innuendo and see who would slip first. Though they did eventually get to a topic on something they had been working on for a while. "I saw that you have the Toad contract in your office," Kyuubi said. The office she was referring to was a large room Naruto had commandeered for his sealing ideas. It was more or less just a decent-sized room with several bookcases that were half filled with books on sealing, and the other half empty to have space for when Naruto created a new seal. The only other furniture in the room was a large desk with a chair. "I had a talk with Tusan a while ago and told him what we were hoping to achieve," Naruto said. "It took a bit of convincing before he was willing to relinquish the contract to me." That had been another conversation that led to a bit of an argument. Minato was very weary of Kitsune due to Kyuubi's attack, so it was understandable that when Naruto informed him of the plans he and Kyuubi had made, the man had been at first adamant on not allowing Naruto anywhere near the contract. It had taken a bit of negotiating to convince his father to get the contract from Jiraiya. Naruto had to point out the benefits having the Kitsune contract in Konoha would grant them, along with the fact that the Kitsune clan were loyal to Kyuubi, who in turn was loyal to Naruto. Minato had been forced to concede that point. Kyuubi was extremely loyal to Naruto and even he could see that. 2 days after their talk he had given Naruto the Toad summoning contract. "Have you had any luck on figuring out how to create a summoning contract?" "I've actually made a small prototype seal," Naruto admitted. "I've managed to modify the kanji on the seal so that it would summon Kitsune instead, however there is more that we'll need to do before we can make a working summoning contract." "Oh?" Kyuubi leaned forward in interest at hearing Naruto was almost done. Having realized Naruto was far better at her in sealing, which she could not deny considering she had never really cared much about seals until she herself was locked behind one, they had decided he would work on it by himself. That was fine with Kyuubi though. She had been working on other things, namely keeping in contact with her clan so she could know how things were going with them and in Makai in general. Naruto nodded as he reached out with a hand and grabbed hers which was on the table. His fingers began to idly play with the fingers of her hand, an action that had Kyuubi smiling as it was a small showing of the blonde's affection for her. In order to summon, each Kitsune that is going to be in the contract needs to sign a separate scroll that is connected to the contract via reverse summoning seal in their blood. This creates a link between the two seals and is what allows the summoning contract to really work. "So I'll probably need to take another trip to Makai soon," Kyuubi said. She had been planning on doing so anyways at some point. They had set up a portal to Makai in one of the unused rooms in their home. She hadn't returned since the time she had come back and ran into Naruto in Oto Fujiangai, having preferred keeping in contact with her brethren via a transmission portal, which acted as a large-scale communicator in the shape of a mirror. "When you do go I would like to go with you," Naruto said, surprising Kyuubi, who had to ask why. He answered by saying, "Before we actually make this summoning contract, it would be best if they know who I am, and see my power for themselves. You said that there were a few people who didn't approve of your decision to ally your clan with Raizen, and I doubt they would approve of me. Chances are they will do their utmost to stir up resentment. But if you meet with them and show how powerful you are and how much my clan would benefit from an alliance with you, it would go a long way towards easing any ill feelings." Kyuubi finished with a smile. She was rather pleased that Naruto had thought of this. "You're learning more about our ways. Pretty soon Mikai's politics will become like second nature to you." Naruto gave her a smile at the compliment as they switched gears to more pleasant topics for the rest of dinner. When it was over, they walked home, Kyuubi's arms wrapped around one of his with her head on his shoulder. As they walked, she couldn't help but notice many of the jealous glares getting sent her way. Even a few of the women who looked like they were with their boyfriend or husband glared at her. Kyuubi snorted. She knew that this would happen once she had been told of the events that had transpired during the Chunin exams. With Naruto's heritage, known people were just lining up to kiss his ass, especially now that everyone knew he was the son of two renowned figures in Konoha, one being the beloved Yondaime Hokage and hero of the Third Great Shinobi War. Plus, with Naruto having become an extraordinarily handsome man in his own right, it had only been a matter of time before women began lusting after him. Not that any of those simpering women and little girls would ever get their hands on her Naruto. They had spoken a little more on him taking multiple women as mates, and Naruto had told her that he would not mate with any female that Kyuubi herself did not agree with. It had caused a powerful warmth to flood her heart at hearing that he was truly treating her as an equal in all things. His words had actually resulted in another bout of delicious and slow love-making, an act which Kyuubi was beginning to love almost as much as when they would rut like kitsune in heat. Both she and Naruto had agreed on choosing women who met several prerequisites. The first being that they had to be strong in mind, spirit, and body. Neither of them liked weakness, Naruto having gained his dislike of being weak from remembering his previous sealed state before becoming a demon, and Kyuubi due to her past before becoming the Kyuubi. Both agreed that they would only look at women who were at least A-ranked on the ninja scale in power, which there were admittedly not many. However, there were a few, and she knew Naruto was close to at least two of them. Naruto also refused to mate with anyone he did not love for as much as Kyuubi, though she had already assumed it would be a stipulation. Much like how he wanted a large family, Naruto also wanted to be loved more than anything. It was hard for most to see as Naruto kept up his nonchalant facade most of the time when in public, but even now her mate was damaged by the abuse he had taken in Konoha. It made Kyuubi want to go back on a rampage and finish what that man had started when he forced her to attack the village. The final stipulation was that Kyuubi had to approve of them. She didn't have to necessarily like them, as she still didn't like humans out of the simple fact that they were human. All she had to do was let Naruto know which women she thought were worthy of being his mate. Though she had to admit she was getting better with her dislike towards humanity, and could acknowledge and even respect some of the kunoichi she had met. Ultimately, the final decision on which women Naruto would mate with would rest with her, a fact that secretly pleased her. Kyuubi's musings left her when they arrived home. After locking the door via sealing method that would only open for people whose chakra was registered in the Master Security Seal, a sealing system set up by Minato to protect Naruto's secrets, the two of them made their way into the living room where they ran into an interesting sight. Tsuchi-kin and Taiyuya were lying on the hearth rug in the center of the room in the middle of a heavy make-out session. Taiyuya was on top of Kin, and their kiss was the kind of hot that borderlined on illegal. While the pair's tongues were visible for Naruto and Kyuubi to see, one of Taiyuya's hands had slipped into Kin's pants and were working the dark-haired girl over furiously. Kin's hands were in Taiyuya's shirt, and from the way they were moving it was not hard to guess what they were doing. Both of them were moaning loudly enough that Kyuubi was sure the people in Konoha would have been able to hear it were it not for the silencing seals that were put in place around the house. Ahem. Naruto coughed loudly enough to get the pair's attention. It was rather amusing to see the way Kin and Taiyuya froze at the sound of his voice. They turned their heads, looking at the demonic pair with a deer-in-the-headlights expression on their face. "Enjoying yourselves, are we?" asked the blonde with a smile. Was all Taiyuya was able to get out. It was a rather impressive feat, Kyuubi decided. The girl was so speechless she couldn't even form a proper sentence, much less swear as she was wont to do. Kin was just laying under her with a large blush on her face, and if the way Kyuubi saw it going down her neck, likely on her entire body as well. While I don't mind the pair of you enjoying each other, I would ask that you do this in the privacy of your own room, Naruto said. Especially since we don't want to give anyone a show. Isn't that right? Kyofu. There was only one person Naruto called by that nickname, and both Kin and Taiyuya knew it. They immediately began looking around to try and spot the man, but couldn't find him. Luckily for them both, Naruto and Kyuubi could tell where he was. The two of them disappeared in a blur of speed before kicking out in front of them and getting a loud oof sound from the invisible object they hit. There was a puff of smoke and Jiraiya appeared before them, landing on his ass with a pair of shoe prints on his face. He rubbed said face, trying to get the sting out of it, and groaned. Damn it, Gaki. Why did you do that? Because I don't like it when people are peeping in my house, Naruto said. I don't care if you peep on the general public of Konoha, but people who are under my protection are out of bounds. Honestly, Naruto didn't care about if Jiraiya went to the hot springs and peeped on women all day, so long as certain people weren't there when he did it. He wasn't particularly caring about the morality of the man's perverted habits, and knew that it was just an eccentricity gained from years of war and the hard life of a shinobi. Like guys, youthfulness, only less youthful. Powerful ninja often gained quirks to deal with what life threw at them, and Naruto knew he had a few of his own thanks to the life he had led so far. However, there were certain lines that just weren't crossed, and Jiraiya had just crossed one of them. Now take your punishment like a man, Naruto continued as several clones jumped Jiraiya and tied him up. The man began to pale and plead, but Naruto ignored him and turned to look at Kin and Taiyuya. Just make sure you two leave him in serviceable condition, he has a mission tomorrow, after all. With nothing more needing to be said, Naruto took Kyuubi in his arms and left the white-haired man to his fate. Naruto, wait. Mercy. Please, not the face. Not the, yes, the face. Yes, the face. Kyuubi smiled as she heard the sounds and pleas and screams of pain, and while she was a tad disappointed that she was not the cause of them, that didn't stop her from drinking in the sound of the man suffering like a fine wine. She may not be as sadistic as most demons, but that didn't mean she didn't enjoy it when a pervert was put in his place like every other female. As Naruto closed and locked the door, activating the silencing and privacy seals at the same time, Kyuubi was beginning to feel up the blonde's body. Eager, Kyuubi-heim? Asked Naruto as the redhead's hands went under his shirt and began caressing his muscled torso. Can't help it, Kyuubi said, her lips kissing every inch of skin they could find. You don't show your sadistic side much, so I rarely get to see it. You don't know just how much seeing you like that turns me on. Naruto chuckled as he turned around and began reciprocating Kyuubi's actions. Nowhere near as much as seeing you in that new lingerie you're wearing under your kimono does to me. Oh? Do you want to see it, Naruto-sama? Asked Kyuubi, cooing as she pulled away from him. She began to dance seductively while she slowly stripped off her kimono, swaying her hips in a way that teased and enticed Naruto. Tantalizing flesh was revealed, inch after inch of creamy, milk-white skin that seemed to hold an unearthly glow. When her entire kimono was undone, it slid off her curvaceous and perfect figure, leaving her in nothing more than dark red lingerie. I seem to be having trouble taking this off. Perhaps you could help me? She asked, smiling seductively at Naruto and beckoned him with a finger. Naruto grinned as he moved towards her, crashing into the red-haired beauty and scooping her into his arms without pausing. He lay her down on the bed and attacked her mouth with his own, his hands going to the clasps on her lacy red bra. It was a good thing they had such powerful silencing and security seals, otherwise Jiraiya would have gotten far more than just two teenage girls having fun tonight. If he were in any condition to spy on them, that is. No doubt the cries, groans, moans, shrieks and giggles that would have come from Naruto's and Kyuubi's room would have given the man more than enough material to produce an entire trilogy of Ika Ika Paradise that night. As it was, even if they didn't have security seals set up, the man was no doubt too busy getting his ass kicked to actually do anything. Too bad for him. Chapter 19, The Bargaining Table. It was early in the morning when Naruto began making his way towards Konoha's north gate. He had decided to go with an outfit similar to Raizen's, in honor of his ancestral father. He was wearing a pair of baggy pants similar to the ones Raizen's apparition had worn when appearing before Naruto, only the blondes were black. Wrapped around his ankles haphazardly as well as his forearms were white bandages, and he was wearing a pair of black knee guards. He was wearing black boots and an orange sash that wrapped around his waist and was tied in a knot on the left side. His headband was also orange, having changed the cloth from his standard black. The only thing he was wearing that Raizen had not was his haori. It was white, and looked much like his father's except with orange flames instead of red, and it was sleeveless instead of short-sleeved. There were numerous seals on the inside, all of which held the gear Naruto felt he needed, as he disliked having his equipment visible. He had even foregone wearing the sheathed blades Kyuubi had given him to use, instead having them sealed inside a pair of storage seals he had placed on the palm of his hands this morning. There was a smile on his face and an added spring in his step, which was due to the wake-up Kyuubi had given him this morning. Since they had no clue how long the negotiations with IWA would last, she had decided to make the most of their morning and woken him up with a blow job. Once he was fully awake, they had enjoyed each other to the fullest. 3 orgasms in quick succession was pretty nice considering they had been short on time, before letting him get up to get dressed and have a quick breakfast. When Naruto reached the gate, he saw that both his father and Jiraiya were already there. The latter was glaring at him, no doubt due to the beating he had taken last night from Kin and Taiyuya. Not that the white-haired man's glare actually did anything. Even were Jiraiya inclined to try and kick his ass, the simple fact was that Naruto was stronger than him. So the blonde was not worried. Besides, Jiraiya had deserved the beating he received last night. An old man should not be peeking on 15-year-old girls. It was just wrong. "To-san, Ero Kyofu," Naruto said, smiling as Jiraiya's eye twitched. "I hope you two are well rested." "I am," Minato said, looking back and forth between Naruto, who was sporting a pleased grin, and Jiraiya, who looked like he had swallowed something foul. In the end he shook his head, deciding that he didn't want to know what had happened between the two. "And I take it you are as well?" "Oh, I don't know about that," Naruto commented with a lecherous grin. "I only got a few hours of sleep. But I don't need that much, and there were more pleasurable things I can do than sleep." Honestly, Naruto didn't see how people like Shikamaru could sleep when that time could be better spent having sex. Not only was the act more fun, it was also good exercise. Jiraiya grumbled about "lucky good-for-nothing brats" and "damn blonde idiots" getting all of the hot redheads, while Minato just shook his head. He wasn't sure he even wanted to think about his sensei's thoughts on redheads, nor that his son was sexually active at such a young age. "Well, if you're both ready, we should get moving. I want to get to Tetsu no Kuni early so we can get a feel for the place before our meeting with Inoki." The pair nodded, Jiraiya becoming semi-serious and Naruto just moving into his normal mission mode. The blonde doubted anything interesting would happen during this mission, and unless Akatsuki attacked there was very little chance of him getting a good fight. 2 days later, Konoha. With Naruto gone, Kyuubi decided that now was a good time to speak with the 2 women she had determined were worthy of being with her Naruto. There were only 2 that she would consider. There had been 3, but Naruto didn't even respect, much less like one of the women she had suggested. The first was Mitarashi Anko. Kyuubi already knew that Naruto had formed a tight friendship with Konoha's snake mistress, and the redhead couldn't deny that the woman's violent nature and bloodlust appealed to Kyuubi's more demonic side. While she herself had not had much interaction with the woman, aside from sharing a few drinks with her on occasion, she knew that Naruto had spent a lot of time with Anko. Often the 2 of them would spar either in a training field or the Forest of Death, though they did other things as well. Kyuubi knew Naruto had taken Anko to see the Princess Gale movies done by the famous actress Yuki Fujikase, and she had also caught Naruto and Anko sleeping together on the woman's sofa one night with the movie running when he had not returned home. Anko was also strong. Being a Tokubetsu Jonin, it was obvious she knew how to fight. But she was also mentally strong. From the information Kyuubi had gathered, Anko was the first person Orochimaru had subject to his Juinjutsu, which at the time of him giving it to her had been a prototype. For someone to have enough mental fortitude to resist the allure of using its power meant they were extremely strong-willed. She also knew that like her Naruto, Anko had been subject to wariness and outright hostility from Konoha thanks to her association with Orochimaru after the man had turned traitor. That she had not broken under their treatment was a testament to her spirit. If there was anyone Kyuubi would allow to mate with Naruto, it was her. The second one was on the fence. Naruto didn't know her as well, and while Kyuubi respected the woman, neither had a clue how she would react to being in what more or less amounted to a harem. Finding them both wasn't that hard. As the rumor of Jiraiya being out of the village on a mission had spread, many of the kunoichi that had been refusing to pay a visit to the hot springs while the legendary pervert was in town had decided to use this opportunity to relax there now. That was where she found both of her targets, though she would have to wait to speak with the pair due to the number of women in the hot springs at the moment. "Anko-chan," she said in greeting. The crazy and fun-loving Jonin had demanded that she be called Anko-chan by her after being introduced to her via Naruto, that or Anko-sama, but Kyuubi would never call a human by that title. It was actually amusing because she was sure that Anko disliked her due to her relationship with Naruto, and was just being friendly because she was Naruto's girlfriend. There was no outright hostility. In fact, the purple-haired snake-summoning Tokubetsu Jonin was downright friendly to her. It was just the general feel she got whenever Naruto and her were intimate. With the same smile on her face she greeted the other woman she had marked as potential mate material. "Kurenai. What's up, Kit-chan?" greeted Anko with a happy smile and red cheeks. It was obvious the Tokubetsu Jonin was a little drunk, and if her physical state wasn't enough to determine that, then the bottle of sake she drank out of a second later was. Kurenai rolled her eyes up before smiling at Kyuubi and greeting her as well. "Kit-san. How are you doing today?" "Well, thank you," Kyuubi said as she leaned her back against the rock that made up the wall. Around her she received several jealous stares from various women, including an envious one from Kurenai. Her coming to the village had garnered much attention, not just because she was seen on Naruto's arm, but also because she bumped the Yuhi Kurenai, who was considered the most beautiful woman in Konoha, down to second place on the list of most beautiful female in Konoha. While she didn't care what humans thought of her, she took perverse pleasure in showing everyone what true beauty was. Not to say that she thought Kurenai and Anko weren't attractive females. With Kurenai's luscious and messy black hair, red eyes that were almost as exotic as hers, and a body many women would kill for, she was definitely a beautiful woman. And Anko wasn't far behind, though she lacked the main quality that gave Kurenai her beauty, which was the red eyes and long black hair. Still, much like Kurenai, Anko had a figure that many women had tried and failed to gain. "With Naruto out on a mission, I figured I would spend my time soaking in the hot springs," the red-haired beauty added. It was a subtle reminder to most of the women currently sitting with them. Naruto was hers, and anyone who wanted a piece of him had to go through her. It seemed to have the desired effect, as many of the women who were close enough to pick up her words glowered at her. Anko also looked slightly put off at the reminder, but unlike the satisfaction Kyuubi got from the other women's anger, Anko's reaction got a different sort of satisfaction. It was obvious she was attracted to Naruto, and that meant she may be willing to hear her out. Kurenai frowned at her as well, though whether from the reminder or for some other reason Kyuubi couldn't fathom was unknown. Since she didn't know the dark-haired woman that well, she was unable to get a fair reading on her thoughts. "Yes, I heard he actually went out on a mission with Yandame-sama and Jiraiya-sama to somewhere. Though no one is saying where." It wasn't hard to figure that Kurenai was fishing for information. While the woman was a serious kunoichi and took her job seriously, she was still a woman. Gossip was something most women did as a pastime. Some just took it to more extremes than others. "I believe they went somewhere up north," Kyuubi said with a shrug. She knew about the situation between Iwa and the two Namikes, and she also knew that they were trying to keep it quiet. While she could tell everyone where they went and be relatively certain that no one would find out why, it was better to be safe than sorry. Kurenai frowned at not being given a complete answer, but nodded. "It must be important to the village if Yandame-sama is leaving. And with two of our best shinobi as well. Personally, I'm glad that Jiraiya, is gone," Anko made the idle comment after she just finished taking another swig of sake. She shook the bottle once, and realizing it was empty set it aside before leaning in so she could join the conversation. "I mean, I haven't been able to take a trip to the hot springs for weeks because that damn pervert has been staking this place out. You should be more respectful of Jiraiya-sama, Anko," Kurenai chided, though Kyuubi noticed it was half-hearted at best. She likely felt the same way, but was just too respectful to authority figures to say anything. "Why should I be respectful to some pervert who only sees me as a piece of meat?" asked Anko with a huff. She crossed her arms under her chest and looked at Kurenai with a slightly petulant expression. "All that man ever does when he comes here and peep on us girls in the hot spring so he can write those trashy porn novels of his." "Trashy porn novels that you read," Kurenai said with a hint of a smirk on her lips. Anko blushed, but tried not to let that little detail get to her as she continued on. "That's not the point. It's pathetic that he has to actually peep on us to get his material," as Anko began to rant on Jiraiya's bad habit peeking on women, and how, if he wanted material for his books, then he should get it the old-fashioned way and have sex. Kyuubi allowed her mind to wander. Naruto was probably in Tetsu no Kuni by now. She had rarely ever been up that far north, but she knew that the samurai country was extremely frigid. "Isn't that right, Kit?" "Kit," Kit, ha! What? Kyuubi looked over at Anko, who was giving her a prominent pout. Realizing that the woman had asked her a question, she had the decency to blush. I'm sorry, Anko-chan, what were you saying? I was just asking if you agreed with me that Jiraiya is nothing more than a perverted, self-serving lecher who deserves to be castrated, Anko said. Kyuubi smiled. I would agree with you, but he knows better than to peek on me. Her words got two curious stares from the pair and she grinned. After all, if he wants to keep the single nut I left him the last time he tried spying on me, he'll keep away. She smiled pleasantly when the two women gave her odd stares, and more than a hint of respect shining in their orbs. Conversation tapered off to more pleasant things after that. Anko spoke of some of the people she interrogated and her methods. While Kurenai found this slightly distasteful, Kyuubi was very interested in the subject. She may not hate humans, as shown by the fact that she was actually suggesting that her Naruto mate with a few. She disliked many of them. The idea of learning new ways to torture those humans she disliked was very appealing to her. Because she needed to talk with the pair, Kyuubi stayed with them until they were ready to leave the hot springs. As they left, she grabbed both of them by the hands, pushing aside the small amount of revulsion she felt at touching a human. She's been getting better, but still had a long way to go as far as liking humans went, and began dragging them along behind her. Hey! What are you doing? Where are you taking us? Asked Anko as she stumbled a little in surprise. Kurenai was also surprised. She had only just managed to regain her balance and was looking at the redhead with undisguised curiosity and the hint of possible violence if Kyuubi didn't answer Anko's question. Her respect the raven-haired, red-eyed kunoichi went up a notch. Kyuubi looked back at the two of them and simply said, "We need to talk." Anko and Kurenai were dragged to an out-of-the-way bar, a low-key dive where only a few patrons came to at any given time. It wasn't a bad-looking place. The tables were clean, the floor was clear of grime and dust, the bartender was a decent man with a mild temper, and the food and sake were good. It was just one of those places that was so far from the entertainment district, where most of the people normally went when looking for a good time, unless you were looking for something more than just a simple drink, in which case the red light district is where you would go, that only shinobi who had just gotten back from a mission ever really came here. Kyuubi proceeded to sit them down and quickly ordered several drinks and several servings of dango. The pair looked at each other in equal amounts of confusion, which increased when Kyuubi took out a small sealing tag with a very complicated array they couldn't even begin to read on it, and slipped it on under their table. Alright, Anko started, her curiosity to know what had gotten into the redhead reaching its peak. She had been patient enough with the woman so far, but now it was time to find out what the hell was going on. What the hell is going on? There you go. Kyuubi leaned back in her chair, arms crossing under her prominent bust as she prepared herself for the coming conversation. I wanted to speak with both of you, and I didn't want anyone else to overhear it. Kurenai raised an eyebrow at this knowledge. If she didn't want anybody else to know what she had to say, it was either very important, very embarrassing, or there was another reason that she just couldn't fathom. She was going to go with the first one. Hold up, let's wait for our food and drinks first so that we're not interrupted. The two women looked put out by this, but figured if it was important enough that she needed a seal, which they only now realized must have been a silencing seal, then it was pretty damned important. So the pair leaned back and waited with Kyuubi as a waiter came with their food and drinks, sporting a rather large blush on his face when he took in the three beauties at the table. However, he quickly scampered away when Kyuubi growled at him. "You have to teach me how to do that," Anko said when the waiter had run off like the hounds of hell were nipping at his heels. It was a very impressive display, to be capable of sending someone scurrying away, tail tucked between their legs with nothing more than a look and a growl. Anko at least needed a healthy dose of killing intent to do that, even to a civilian like that man. Maybe later, Kyuubi said with a sly smile. Now, I wanted to speak to the two of you about Naruto. Naruto? The two said at the same time. The two kunoichi who had no clue about what was going on looked at each other after having their small bonding moment, before Anko took up the question they both had. What about him? I want to know what you two think about him, said Kyuubi, not elaborating further. She looked at Kurenai, determining that the one she was unsure about should go first. Kurenai stuttered about for a moment, clearly unsure of what she wanted to say, or if she even wanted to say anything at all. However, after a moment of squirming uncomfortably from Kyuubi's penetrating gaze, she said, I think he's a very nice and honorably young man. He helped me out quite a bit when I was having relationship problems with Asuma. After Naruto encouraged Kurenai not to put up with his pushing, she had gone to confront the man. Thankfully Hana had stopped her before she went to see Asuma while drunk, and convinced her to wait until tomorrow when she was more sober. The next day she had talked with the son of the Sandaime Hokage, and like always they had gotten into an argument, with Asuma claiming that he had been more than patient with her and it was time for her to give him something. It was a claim most men tended to make of the woman they're dating, and one Kurenai had heard before in the only other relationship she had. Surprisingly enough, with a little digging Kyuubi had found out that relationship had been with none other than Hitaki Kakashi. Surprising because she didn't take Kurenai as the type who would go for a man who openly read smut in public. Then again, maybe that was why she hated Ika and perverts so much. However, this time Kurenai had decided she didn't want to put out and sleep with Asuma unless she was 100% sure of his commitment to her. When Asuma had tried offering false platitudes that he needed time before committing to a relationship, she had left him and not looked back. A good thing too, because less than 2 days later she had seen him whining and dining some civilian woman. However, I don't know enough about him to give you an honest assessment on what I think of him, Kurenai finished honestly. I see, Kyuubi said with a nod. Do you think he's physically attractive? What? Kurenai was lucky she had not been drinking anything, otherwise she would have spit it out in her surprise at the question. Enko, who had just taken a sip of sake, and subsequently spit it all over the floor, was proof of that. With a large blush staining her cheeks, the raven-haired Kunoichi asked, "Why are you asking me something like that? Just answer the question please," Kyuubi said, still looking at the raven-haired beauty with that serious and penetrating stare. How a woman, that as far as they knew was a simple civilian, could give such a stare and use it effectively against a trained killer was beyond them. Too bad they didn't know that she was one of the single most powerful entities in the world. That is to say had the question not been that important, and had Kyuubi not been all that interested in the answer, she probably would have been amused. As it was, seeing the woman stuttering over her words was only serving to annoy her. It's a simple yes or no question, Kurenai, Kyuubi said, her voice holding a slight strain, letting on that she was losing her patience. Yes, Kurenai said after a moment's hesitation. She blushed a bit and looked away. Yes, I think he's attractive. Though I still don't know what his looks have to do with why you called us here. I'll get to that in a moment, Kyuubi stated before turning to Enko, who blushed under the woman's gaze. Since Kurenai already went, I don't think I need to tell you what I want to hear. Enko shook her head. She paused for a moment, her eyes glazing in slight thought as she tried to come up with the words she wanted to use to describe Naruto. I think Naruto-kun's an amazing and kind person. Despite what he's been through, he's still willing to help others with their problems, though I am glad he doesn't put up with people's shit anymore. That was something of an understatement. Though Naruto was now widely loved in Konoha, some of the people praising his name was only for public appearances. A few people only hailed him as a savior so they wouldn't have to face the wrath of the Yondaime. This was proven when Naruto had run in with a villager who had been so drunk Kyuubi had thought the man had literally swam in a tub of alcohol. That was how much he reeked. It was the night after Naruto returned from the village with Tsunade, and he had decided to take Kyuubi out on their first ever date. While she would never admit it, the red-haired beauty had been ecstatic about actually going on a date. Demon mating rituals were much different than the human equivalent. When a demon of great power claimed a mate, it usually happened within the first few days of meeting each other. Once marked, the female demon would then be bound to their mate for life, or until said mate died. After that, the female was duty-bound to produce children, and that was more or less their lot in life. There was no dating in the demon world, no extravagant dinners, no trips to the movies, there was nothing for a couple to do there. Makai didn't even have a movie theater for movies. So Kyuubi was understandably excited about actually being able to go on a date and get to know her mate in a more public forum. Not only was it a chance to do something she had never done before, but it also allowed her to stake her claim on Naruto and let everyone know that they wouldn't be able to get the blonde without going through her. Their first date was rather simple. Naruto had made several kage bunshin to create a variety of food and had it placed in a picnic basket. He had taken her to one of the many parks that littered Konoha and they had a picnic. Kyuubi still fondly remembered their first date. After eating they had played a game of 20 questions in order to get to know each other better. It was fun because, even though she had been sealed inside of him and knew quite a bit, there was still a lot more to the blonde that she didn't know. And Kyuubi was, well, she was far older than she looked, and there was a lot about her that Naruto didn't know. It was something that came with being the mate of a demon. However, their little game took a very different turn than what either of them had expected. Each question they asked went from innocuous, normal questions, to ones that were designed to fluster and frustrate the other. Naruto had ended up winning that game, as despite being somewhere around 1,000 years old, she didn't have much experience in flirting. Not that Naruto did either, but he had more confidence than she did when it came to doing something so human. After the game, however, they had just cuddled on the blanket, letting the sun warm their bodies. Of course, being who they were, simple snuggling didn't last long. It had started with a simple kiss, which had become more impassioned as the seconds went on. Eventually she and Naruto had gotten involved in a heavy make-out session with dueling tongues and wandering hands. They probably would have ended up going further were it not for a little boy who found them and asked his parents what she and her mate were doing. Kyuubi still snickered at the memory of how the boy's parents stuttered through the atypical parental answer relating to all things sexual to a 6-year-old boy. "We'll tell you when you're older." After that, the pair decided to head back home so they could enjoy each other without worrying about traumatizing some little kid, and their parents, with their blatant sexual acts. They had decided to walk as it had been a nice day, and they both knew that the moment they got started neither would stop until well past midnight. It was on their journey back that they had run afoul of the drunk. Kyuubi didn't know why the man had been drinking so heavily, and truthfully didn't care. It had only been Naruto holding her back that spared the fool from her wrath once he had stumbled upon them. The moment the man had laid eyes on Naruto he had ranted and raved, claiming that the demon had probably tricked them into believing the yondaime was alive and that he was the man's son. The idiot had then gone on to say that Konoha would be better off if he had died. Throughout the whole man's rant Naruto had been getting more and more angered and likely would have beaten the crap out of him. Then the drunkard had done something unforgivable. At least to Naruto. The idiotic and drunken man had begun hitting on Kyuubi, claiming that she shouldn't be with a demon and if she went back with him, he would show her what a real man was like in bed. There were truly no words to describe what Naruto had done to that man. He hadn't killed him, as the blonde believed death was far too light of a punishment. No, the man was still alive. But he had been permanently placed within the psychiatric ward for the criminally insane. The man was now nothing more than a raging lunatic that spent all of his waking hours screaming incoherently and running into walls due to how badly his mind had been shattered. Kyuubi snapped out of her reminiscing and nodded. "And do you find him attractive?" Anko squirmed a bit but she nodded. "It's not hard to." She sighed and both Kyuubi and Kurenai bore witness to the sight of Anko gaining a dreamy look on her face. An impossibility if there ever was one. "He has a smile that just makes me melt inside, and those bewitching eyes that I could stare at for hours. His hair reminds me of the sun, radiant, and Kami that body." She was interrupted when a pair of snickers came from Kyuubi and Kurenai. My, it looks like Anko-chan has gained quite the crush," Kurenai teased. Kyuubi grinned. "Well, I think we all know what you think of Naruto-sama." Anko's cheeks flared red. She quickly did her best to cover up her embarrassment by glaring at the two and managed to hiss out, "If either of you say anything about this, I'll kill you." "Oh, relax," Kyuubi said with a chuckle. "Our lips are sealed, now that we've managed to thoroughly embarrass Anko." "Why don't you tell us what this is about?" said Kurenai. Kyuubi sighed as she tried to think of the best way to say what she wanted to say. After going through several different speeches in her head she decided to just wing it. Very well, as she began to explain the reason she had wanted to speak with the pair, Anko and Kurenai felt their eyes getting wider and wider, until they were sure it would pop out of their skull. With Naruto, Tetsu no Kuni. It hadn't taken that long for the 3S-ranked ninja to reach Tetsu no Kuni, having been running towards the country at a full shinobi sprint. They had gone on much of the time without rest, only stopping to eat and make camp when the daylight had faded completely to black. The speed of their movements had been the kind that only ninja of their level achieved, and it had made it so that the three of them managed to reach Tetsu no Kuni in 2 weeks, instead of the standard month it would take most ninja to get there. As they reached the front gate of the village where their meeting with IWA was to take place, several samurai stepped in front of them. Naruto watched as a man stepped in front of them, no doubt the leader of the samurai. This man had long gray hair, which almost reached down to his waist, with bandages wrapped around his head. He had black eyes with distinct wrinkles underneath them. He also had a gray goatee and mustache. Naruto figured he was the guy in charge as not only had he stepped up to them, he was also the only one not wearing a helmet. "I would like you to welcome you three, Namikaze Minato-san, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto-san and Jiraiya of Dansetsu no Sannin, your reputations precede you. I am Milfune," the man said in greeting. He also bowed to them, an action which Minato, Jiraiya, and after a few seconds, Naruto replicated. Before you enter, I would like to warn you of the repercussions of acting out within our land. We have allowed this meeting to take place as a way for two enemies to meet on neutral and protected soil, and as such we expect both parties to follow all of our laws and to not antagonize the group that will be coming from Iwagakure no Sato. Also, we would ask that you not disturb or disrupt the lives of our citizens. Know that we will be watching you during your stay, and any misuse of our hospitality will not go unpunished. We understand, Minato said with a respectful bow of his head. And you have nothing to worry from us. Myself and my two guards will conduct ourselves with utmost respect for your laws. We have no desire to antagonize a country like Tetsu no Kuni. Milfune nodded. I thank you for your words. Try not to take them as anything overtly threatening. We always give the same warning to any foreign dignitaries that step on our soil. Giving a bow, Milfune stepped back, and the samurai that had been blocking their path previously split apart, allowing the group to pass through. Though you three are early, we have already set up accommodations for you. Please allow us to escort you to your hotel. As the three Konoha shinobi moved into the village proper, following Milfune who was leading them, 5 of the samurai broke off and from the guards and surrounded them in a pentagon formation. As they walked along, Naruto found himself looking at the samurai as they walked, one hand grasping their sheath, and the other lightly resting on the handle for quick draw if necessary. During their journey to the famed Samura country, Minato and Jiraiya had briefed Naruto on what they knew about the samurai of this nation. Therefore it was no surprise that Naruto was able to figure out that the formation's purpose was designed to protect both them from potential threats, and the citizens from them. It was an admittedly genius formation and one that gave the samurai great advantage as they could deal with both anything that threatened those they were guarding, and the citizens in case those they were guarding decided to get violent. They were also spaced out in such a way that they could cover each other's flanks equally, with enough space to swing their katana in any direction without fear of hitting one of their own and still protect the comrades closest to them. While they journeyed to their hotel, Naruto studied the general layout of the city. The city itself was very traditional as far as architecture went. It was about the size of Konoha, maybe a little bigger, and all of the buildings were created in a classical Edo style, with dozo storehouses being used to contain goods and supplies, and Tsukiyazukuri residential buildings. While many of daimyos still held similar taste when it came to their palaces, walking around Tetsu no Kuni felt much like walking in the past. There was very little in the way of modern architecture. Likewise, its people held a very traditionalist view on things. Many of the people seemed to ignore the shinobi, only glancing at them for a second as if they were an idle curiosity. They did not even appear to be all that concerned about having 3 of the world's most powerful ninja in their midst. Not that Naruto could blame them, with the 5 samurai not including Milfune guarding them, and the samurai that the blonde could see watching them, only a fool would actually make an attempt at attacking them. Or a demon, but that was neither here nor there as Naruto had no desire to attack the people of this country. They were shown to their hotel room, an extravagant 3-bedroom suite with lavish furniture. In most cases Naruto would have assumed that the room they were given was a place designed to impress foreign dignitaries. However, given Tetsu no Kuni held a very traditional look and seemed to enjoy its posh and expensive-looking architecture, ended up going on the assumption that most hotels were similar in appearance to this one. The 3 of them were left alone after that, though Naruto could sense the presence of 2 samurai outside their door. No doubt they going to be the group's permanent escort detail while in the country. He ignored them and turned his attention to his father. So what now? He asked. We'll rest up for now, Minato answered. However, tomorrow I am going to speak with Milfune to see what security arrangements have been set up for the meeting. While I do that, I want the 2 of you to walk around and get a feel for the village. Tetsu no Kuni is much different than any other nation in the elemental countries. Both Naruto and Jiraiya gave a nod, understanding the hidden meaning in Minato's words. They were to figure out the layout of the village and discover any weaknesses that IWA might exploit, or that they could use in the event of IWA betraying them. It would be important to keep any fighting that might happen as a result of IWA betraying them away from the citizens, so a couple of escape routes would also be necessary. In that case, I'm going to get cleaned up before hitting the sack, said Naruto as he made his to the bathroom. 3 days later. Naruto took a sip of his tea as he and his father were sitting in at a table outside of a quaint restaurant. Jiraiya was nowhere to be found, and Naruto figured the man had already found the closest hot spring and was peeping on the women there to gain more inspiration for his novels. He only hoped the samurai wouldn't be offended by the man's terrible habits, and if they were that they only took it out on Jiraiya for being stupid enough to peek on women while in a country that did not have a treaty with Konoha. The past few days had been an interesting affair for the blonde Uzumaki. The day after they arrived in Tetsu no Kuni, he and Jiraiya had walked around the village, taking the sights while secretly mapping out any escape routes and back alleys they could use in case IWA decided to stab them in the back during the negotiations. Thanks to the village itself being very organized in how it was built, the two had been able to create a map of the entire place, including coming up with a schedule on the guard shift changes in each of the exits they had mapped out. During that time they had been followed by the samurai that had been sent to protect, and no doubt ensure that they did not cause trouble. It had been amusing to watch the samurai following them as they had walked around the village, mostly because of how easy it was to spot them. Not only did they make no effort to remain invisible, but their armor clanked and changed every time they took a step. Though with that armor, Naruto figured it would be impossible to be silent anyways, and as they were not ninja, stealth mattered little to them. It had also been kind of nice, staying in the cold town. While it was obvious that they were known, not just by the samurai but the civilians too, it was equally obvious they didn't care. To most people that might be annoying, but to Naruto, who was getting sick of the sycophancy that the people of Konoha were showing him, it was very pleasant. The only time Naruto had ever been able to truly relax while not in the privacy of his room, was when he was out on missions. Of course there were a few problems about being in a foreign village, chief among them being that Naruto found himself missing his friends. It was a novel experience for the blonde, who had never actually had friends before. At the academy he was the dope, the dead last loser that everyone made fun of. While he had on rare occasion hung out with the likes of Kiba, Choji and Shikamaru, that was only when they were all in trouble with Iruka. Once detention was served either by ditching or actually serving detention, the three of them had always parted ways with Naruto, leaving him to himself. What amused Naruto the most was that while he and the people in his age group were on friendly terms, he still wouldn't consider them true friends. True, he spent time with them on occasion, but that was rare and he only did it once in a blue moon. Also the fact that his friends were their Jonin senseis and shinobi twice as old as the Konoha 9 was another entertaining thought. Before he had left, Naruto's Burgoyne friendship with Enko, which had started when the woman attacked him during a training session, had become a very permanent part of his life, and one he would not give up. Of course, with her came his friendship with Kurenai, who was the woman's best and only true friend in the village. While he and Kurenai were not as close as he and Enko, the woman had spent occasional time with him. Especially after he had given her advice on what to do about Asuma. It had still amused him when he heard of how Kurenai tore into the man, not that he had anything against the son of Sarutobi, but really, he should have known better than to try and force a woman of Kurenai's caliber to put out without him committing to their relationship. There were others he had befriended, namely Inuzuka Hana, who had decided after their mission to retrieve Tsunade that he was the coolest person in his age group, a fact which he knew she rubbed in Kiba's face. He still remembered the time she and him had pranked Kiba good by pretending to be having sex in her room. Once the poor boy had heard their moans and cries he had barged in, not even bothering to notice the air did not smell of sex. Though Naruto wasn't sure Kiba would have recognized the scent anyways. He had a lot of bark but his bite left a lot to be desired. He also spent time with Shiranui Ginma, Izumo and Kotetsu, when they were not on gate duty, Ibiki and of course Shizune who had become something of an older sister figure to him. All of them were fairly interesting people, and didn't seem to care whose son he was who he used to contain. They still think he contains Kyuubi. Naruto, at the sound of his father's voice, the demonic shinobi snapped out of his thoughts. Looking up he saw his dad staring at him with a raised eyebrow, causing him to grin sheepishly. Yes? Were you saying something? Asked Naruto, scratching the back of his head. I swear, you may look like me but your personality is almost all Kushina-chan's, Minato said with a sigh, though a smile was still in place. It was nice, to be honest, knowing that his son took more after Kushina in personality than him. I was asking why you refused to train under Jiraiya-sensei. He's a great man you know, and you could learn a lot from him. So you've said, Naruto replied, blowing out a large breath. The day he and Jiraiya had scouted out the village the white-haired Sannin had asked Naruto to become his apprentice. Truth be told it was an intriguing offer, and he knew the man had a lot of knowledge. However, in the end Naruto decided not to accept the man's offer to become his apprentice. I'm surprised you would ask a question like that when the answer should be obvious. Look, Naruto, I know you're powerful and all. But Jiraiya-sensei's not a weakling either, Minato said in defense of his sensei. I'm sure if you accepted his offer you'd find that he can teach you much. Be that as it may, I'm not going to, and we both know why, Naruto said. Unless you told him everything about me while I wasn't around, then Jiraiya doesn't know everything there is to know about me. That includes our heritage. Naruto sighed as he leaned back in his seat. The fact is my power works differently than anyone else's. Even my human chakra is different than most people's, because I am an Uzumaki who activated the highest stage of our bloodline. Combined with your Kekkei Genkei, I'm simply too different for anyone but Kit to properly train me. Granted, but he can teach you non-chakra related lessons, Minato said. Fuinjutsu for one, or Bojutsu, I myself never learned it but I know that Jiraiya-sensei knows the basic style of the Sarutobi clan. There are a lot of things he could teach you that don't necessarily have to do with chakra. Noticing that Naruto still didn't look interested he said, at least think about it. Jiraiya-sensei was hoping to teach you what he knows, he is your godfather after all. Alright, Naruto said irritably. I'll think about, okay. Minato grinned, that's all I can ask for. He then frowned and said, speaking of, where is Jiraiya-sensei? As if beckoned by his words the screams of Minato's teacher could be heard all across the village. Not the face. Not the, oh Kami. Yes the face. Yes the face. Well, I think that answers your question, Naruto said with a chuckle. Talk about deja vu ha, that man never seems to learn. Minato just sweat dropped, a large blush on his face as he listened to Jiraiya's unmanly screams of pain. While he loved his sensei like a son loves a father, sometimes that man was just an embarrassment to mankind. Tetsu no Kuni, the meeting. Inoki felt a sense of dread as he and his two guards, Akatsuchi and Kuratsuchi walked to the meeting hall in Tetsu no Kuni. Not since his fight against Uchiha Madara had he felt this kind of fear. Even during the first, second and third shinobi wars had never felt this kind of fear. He once again took this chance to curse himself for even thinking of trying to assassinate the Namikaze brat. When he had first learned that Namikaze Minato was not only alive but also had a son that had been living in Konoha for the past 12 years, he had admittedly freaked out. The moment he had heard from some of the few spies he had managed to sneak into Hai no Kuni that the child of Namikaze had left Konoha on a mission, he had authorized the boy's assassination. He would not allow the child of Namikaze to become as powerful as his father. It had been Inoki's hope that Kuratsuchi and a squad of his best ninja could kill the boy and cover up the evidence, making it look like the child of Minato had been killed by a missing ninja so that blame would not be placed on his village. What he hadn't counted on was that blonde boy would be every bit as powerful as his father. Because Konoha and IWA were still the most hated enemies, not only that but thanks to the last war IWA still had yet to recover, getting a spy inside of Konoha even during a prestigious event like the Chunin Exams was impossible. It was because of this that Inoki had been unable to make an informed decision and jumped the gun when he tried to have Naruto killed. He had no clue that the Namikaze brat had the Rinnegan, much less that it was actually he who killed Orochimaru. Had he known the kid possessed the legendary Dojutsu, and was powerful enough to kill a Sannin, he would have never sent Kuratsuchi and her squad to kill him. And now he had to suffer the consequences for his actions, to pay the piper as it were. While assassination was very common in the shinobi world, whether to off a rival or to kill off a hated enemy, assassinations happened very often. However, there were also steep consequences should the person one is trying to kill survive, and it's even worse when that person discovers who it was that tried to kill them. If they survived, security around them was often that much tighter, making another attempt impossible. If they survived and discovered how it was that ordered their assassination, the issues that arose were that much worse. For the attempt assassination of someone like Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, who was the son of a Kage, it was very much akin to a declaration of war, much like what would happen were a daimyo or the close relative of a daimyo killed. Such acts were often dealt with very harshly, wars had been made on less intense issues after all. Worse still was that IWA was in no position to actually fight off Konoha, especially now that they had the Yondaime Hokage, his son, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Jiraiya and Senju Tsunade of the Densetsu no Sannin. That was 5 S-ranked ninja, with them and the combined force of Konoha behind them their power was nearly unmatched. Inoki doubted that even Akatsuki would be capable of defeating such a powerful group of ninja. Tsuchikage-sama, we're here, said Akatsuchi, snapping the old village leader out of his stupor. Ahead of the 3 IWA ninja a pair of double doors were opened by 2 samurai. Walking into the room they saw that the Yondaime and his escort was already there. Beside him, Kuratsuchi stiffened. Not that it was hard for Inoki to understand why. Standing on either side of Minato, who was a fearsome figure in and of himself thanks to his reputation, were both Jiraiya and Naruto. As Inoki stared at the young son of Namikaze Minato, he couldn't help but feel a chill pass through him. Aside from the powerful build the young teenager was sporting, which while not large and bulky like that brute of a Raikage still looked very powerful, he also had his Rinnegan active. Staring into the blue and silver ripple-like patterned eyes, it was not hard for the aging Tsuchikage to understand just why Kuratsuchi shivered in fear at the mere mention of the blonde's name. "Ah, good, you're here," Milfion said as the Tsuchikage was seated with his 2 bodyguards standing behind him. "Now we can start this meeting. I am Milfion, and will be the mediator for you two during these negotiations. I want you both to know that, as a neutral party, I will not take sides in this, and am only here to ensure that there is no misconduct between you two while in Tetsu no Kuni." Minato nodded his appreciation to Milfion before turning his gaze on Inoki. While his glacial cold eyes did not cause the same chills that Naruto's Rinnegan did, they were still fierce. "I'm not one for beating around the bush in matters such as these, so we will get to the point. You tried to kill my son, and in many instances such an act can be taken as a declaration of war. I am sure this is something you wish to avoid as much as I do. After all, your village's shinobi force is less than a third of what it used to be." Inoki winced as Minato mentioned his force's strength, or to be more accurate its lack thereof. Ever since the Third Great Shinobi War, Iwagakure had been a mere shell of its former self. The amount of men that had been killed in the war, many of which were slaughtered by the very man in front of him, had been enough to shatter the backbone of his ninja forces. Combine the amount of shinobi lost during the war to Minato and the demobilization of his forces thanks to the peace that had pervaded since then, equated to the current strength of his village being less than even Suna, which had always been the smallest of the Great Five. He had been hoping to bluff his way into a better position, but now that Minato had called out his village's lack of strength, any advantage that was to be had was now lost. Sighing, Inoki felt all of his 90-plus years of life. "What you say is true," he winced, hating to admit such a weakness. No doubt Naruto had pulled that information out of Kuratsuchi's mind with that blasted Rinnegan of his. "However, I am still a Kage of my village. While I am willing to negotiate with you, we will not bend to Konoha. And there's that famous stubbornness you're so well known for," Minato commented lightly. It was a mocking comment, and Inoki knew it. Kuratsuchi had always referred to him as a stubborn old goat. "Should you not agree to my demands, make no mistake, I will return to Konoha and inform the council of your actions against my son. Right now, Konoha is unaware that you have attempted to assassinate Naruto, that however, can change very easily. I'm sure you know what would happen should news of this get out to the citizens." Inoki grimaced, his face a mixture of angry, humiliated and fearful, though he did his best to hide these feelings from the 3 Konoha ninja. He knew what would happen if word got out that he tried to kill the Namikaze brat. The citizens of that damn tree-huger village would be braying for his blood. "So what is it you want then?" asked Inoki quickly, wanting nothing more than to get this out of the way. In response to his question, Naruto pulled out a scroll from his left hip pouch. Inoki, as well as his 2 bodyguards, tensed, an instinctive act when seeing something with unknowing eyes. The blonde must have noticed this, because he smirked a bit as he handed the small scroll off to Minato. The Yondaime Hokage took the scroll from his son, set it down on the table, and unrolled it. He then bit his thumb, swiped some blood along the scroll, and unsealed another scroll. This new scroll was given to Mifune, who came over, took it, and walked over to Inoki, where he presented it to the old Tsuchikage. The aging man looked at the scroll, suspicion evident on his features. However, after a moment of looking between the scroll, Mifune, Minato and Naruto, he ended up grabbing the scroll. Instincts told him this was the safest poison he could take in this instance. However, when he read the scroll, and saw the demands listed on it, Inoki's face took on a shade of red that few could match. "These demands are ridiculous," he spat, tossing the scroll back onto the hardwood surface. He glared across the table at the man he hated almost as much as Uchiha Madara. "I don't know how you expect my people to meet such demands. They violate the very rights and beliefs of my people. Your people must be a bunch of barbaric fools then," Naruto commented idly. "Watch your tongue when speaking to your elders, boy." The old Tsuchikage grit his teeth angrily as his glare shifted from Minato to Naruto. Just because Inoki was petrified of the child of Namikaze didn't mean he was going to put up with any of the brat's lip. Naruto, however, just smiled. Seeing this, Minato quickly sought to head off his son before the boy could say something that would likely start a war. Sometimes, he regretted that his son had Kushina's personality. I do not think these requests are unreasonable at all, Minato said. It's not like we're asking you to cut back your military, nor are we stopping you from building up your army. No, Inoki cut in bitterly. You're just asking us to give up our autonomy. Surely you jest, Minato fired back swiftly. There is nothing in there that says you must swear the lifeblood of your village for Konoha. These demands are merely being put in place so that you cannot attack us again, or assassinate somebody's son. He saw the older man flinch and gave a grim smile. Consider this an insurance policy. When Inoki looked like he was still on the fence, Naruto decided to cut in once more. Would you prefer we just leave? Perhaps you would prefer it if we inform Konoha of your actions and decide that going to war is preferable over letting your village continue breathing? Inoki grit his teeth, his hands underneath the table clenched until they became ghostly pale. He knew the blonde's words weren't an idle threat, and even though Minato sent his son a sharp glance, the one he turned back on Inoki told the old man that what his son spoke was true. He wasn't being given much of a choice. There are still a few things about these demands that I don't like, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to gripe and complain. Oh? Minato raised an eyebrow, as if pleasantly surprised. And what about these demands don't you like? I am sure that if you tell me, we'll be able to find a suitable compromise. Inoki shivered at the words spoken at the end. There was an implied threat in there, and even though he didn't know what it was, he knew it could be good. Still, he had to at least try to lower the demands they wanted him to meet. To not do so would not only be an utter humiliation, it would end up crippling much of his village's economy. If nothing else, he had to try getting a better bargain that wouldn't end with his village being destroyed either way, even if he didn't have much hope. That's it for part 9. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.